I want to ask you something, but I want you to sit with it for a second before you answer. Do you think you're a good leader? Most people I work with would say yes, and I would believe them. They genuinely care about their teams, they work really hard, and they think carefully about what they're doing. They're not the villain in anyone's story, or at least they're not trying to be. One of the most impactful things I have learned as a leader is that caring about your impact and actually having the impact you intend are two different things. And closing the gap between them can actually make a huge difference in the response that you're going to get from people. So today, we're going to talk about that gap. What causes it, why even skilled and well-meaning leaders fall into it, and most importantly, what you can do about it. Because if you're here watching this, you probably already care. So my job is to help you make sure that caring actually translates into action and impact. I'm Dr. Rachel Ingel-Champion. I'm an organizational psychologist and executive coach. I've spent 20 years inside some of the world's biggest companies, embedded in the work of designing organizations, building leadership capability, and figuring out why smart, well-intentioned people so often struggle to lead the way they mean to. And I've made every single mistake I'm about to describe. You learn the most about the gap between intent and impact by falling into it yourself. So let's start there with a story. A few years ago, I was working on a major transformation project. Big scope, cross-functional teams, high stakes. And then about halfway through, our timeline got cut by 3 months. So 7 months became 4, seemingly overnight. As a team, we needed to divide and conquer. Everyone knows their lane, trust the process. So my mantra became, I trust you, just get it done. We had weekly syncs, daily stand-ups. We thought we were doing all the right things structurally. But when issues came up, people surfaced problems. Even my own response was something like, we only have 60 days left. Just fix it and keep moving. I was curt, direct, and fast. I thought I was being efficient. I thought I trust you was empowering. But at some point, we had an alignment meeting to check to make sure all the working pieces were fitting together, and they weren't. One team had built a process, another had built a structure, but they didn't really connect. We'd been working in parallel without coordinating, and now we had a problem that would cost us the time that we didn't have. I was stunned. How could this happen? We had stand-ups and syncs. They could have talked to each other. But after some reflection, I realized how little things, even my own behavior, contributed to this. Every time I said, just get it done, I was implicitly telling people to prioritize their own work over alignment. Every time I celebrated completion without asking how it connected to the broader picture, I was rewarding speed over coordination. And every time I responded curtly to a raised concern, I was training people that surfacing risks was not worth the friction. And I wasn't doing any of this on purpose. I was doing it because I was stressed, because I was worried about the timeline, because I default to directness and speed when I'm under pressure. And I didn't see what that was doing to the people around me. That's the gap. My intent was to inspire confidence and move fast. My impact was to silence collaboration and create exactly the problem that I was trying to avoid. So why did this happen? What I experienced has a name. Daniel Goleman, who spent decades studying emotional intelligence in leaders, identified something really important. At senior leadership levels, 90% of the difference between average and outstanding performers comes down to emotional intelligence. Not technical skill, not cognitive ability, not experience, emotional intelligence. And at the center of emotional intelligence is self-awareness, the ability to see yourself clearly, your patterns, your triggers, how you're landing with people around you. That's the foundation that everything's built on. Organizational psychologist Tasha Eurich has spent years studying self-awareness in professionals. Her research found that 95% of people believe they are self-aware. The actual number of people who are, between 10 and 15%. That's an enormous gap with very real consequences. She also found that the more power you hold, the less self-aware you tend to become. The people in the room who most need accurate feedback about how they're showing up are the least likely to be getting it. Why? Because power changes the information environment around you. People stop telling you hard truths. They soften feedback. They read your reactions and adjust accordingly. Your direct reports learn what to bring you and what to leave out. And slowly, without realizing it, you start operating on an incomplete picture of your own impact. Goleman's research on emotional contagion makes this even more urgent. Leader emotions spread through teams unconsciously. Your stress becomes their stress. Your anxiety becomes their caution. Your frustration shapes whether they feel safe speaking up or whether they quietly decide it's not worth it. You don't have to be in a bad mood for this to happen. You don't even have to yell or criticize anyone. You just have to be unaware of what you're transmitting. In my coaching work, I've noticed the gap between intent and impact tends to appear in 3 consistent places. Let me walk you through each one. The first is under pressure. We all have default patterns, the comfortable behaviors we fall back on when things get really hard. For me, it's speed and directness. For others, it's control, withdrawal, or people-pleasing. These defaults aren't bad in and of themselves. They're usually just patterns that have worked for us in the past. The ones that got us promoted, the ones that our environments actually reinforced and rewarded. But under pressure, those same defaults become amplified, and amplified defaults are almost always misread. So here's some gaps that I've seen in action. The leader who becomes more directive under stress is trying to signal confidence, but their team experiences it as micromanagement. The leader who goes quiet is trying to think. Their team experiences disengagement or disapproval. The leader who keeps pushing forward is trying to inspire resilience. Their team experiences it as being ignored. The gap is widest exactly when the stakes are highest, and if you don't recognize your default pattern, you can't manage it. The second is in feedback, or the absence of it. Most leaders think they communicate more clearly than they do, and most leaders also receive less honest feedback than they believe that they do. The result is a closed loop. You think you're landing well because nobody is telling you otherwise. But nobody is telling you otherwise because the way you show up or just your title or position makes honest feedback feel risky. Research on leader self-awareness consistently shows that leaders who actively seek uncomfortable feedback, the ones that say, I need you to tell me when I'm getting in my own way, and then visibly receive that feedback without defensiveness, those leaders are rated as significantly more effective by the people around them because they've made it safe for them to tell the truth. The third is in what you reward. What you celebrate teaches people what you actually value, regardless of what you say you value. So, if you say you want collaboration, but you celebrate individual wins, people learn that collaboration is optional. If you say you want people to surface problems, but you react to problems with frustration, people learn that silence is safer. If you say you want innovation, but every failed experiment has a consequence, people learn to manage risk by not taking any. You are constantly teaching the people around you what matters most through what you notice, what you reward, and what you let slide. The question is whether the curriculum you're delivering matches the curriculum that you intend. So here's what closing the gap looks like. None of this requires you to become a different person. It does require you becoming more aware of the person you already are. Here's what that looked like in practice for me and what I've seen work with the leaders I coach. Start with a daily reflection practice. Take just 15 minutes at the end of your day. What were my objectives today? How did I want to show up? What did I actually do? This also works to get ahead of things in the morning. What are my objectives today? How do I want to show up? What will I do to close the gap? Leading teams, I started doing something similar every morning. What does my team need from me today? And then every evening, did I give them that? The small shift changed the questions that I asked in meetings, the way I responded to problems, and what I chose to celebrate. When I was living day to day without reflection, it felt like I was moving fast, but I'd sometimes leave a bit of chaos in my wake. But when I slowed down enough to be intentional, I actually moved faster and my team felt the difference. So here are 3 things you can start to do today. Number 1, get curious about your defaults. You don't need a formal 360 assessment for this, though a good validated one can be really helpful. You just need to be honest about what you do when things get hard. Do you speed up? Do you withdraw? Do you over-explain? do you control? Knowing your pattern means that you can catch it before it catches you. Build in one feedback channel you actually trust. So this might be a coach, a mentor, a peer who will tell you the truth, a team member you've specifically asked to flag when you're not landing the way you intend. The point is to create this consistent source of honest input that doesn't depend on people feeling brave enough to volunteer it. You have to make it structural because you can't rely on the natural information flow when you're the one setting the tone. So pay attention to what you're rewarding. Once a week, ask yourself, what behavior did I notice, name, or celebrate this week? Does that match what I say I value? If it doesn't, you have your work for next week. So let's think about the bigger picture. What I've come to believe in my work is that the gap between intent and impact isn't a failure or evidence that you're a bad person or a bad leader. It's evidence that leadership is genuinely hard, that self-knowledge requires active cultivation, and that the systems around us, organizational hierarchies, power dynamics, the way feedback naturally flows, these actually work against honest self-assessment unless you deliberately build structures to counteract them. Most of us aren't taking the time we really need to reflect on ourselves and our impact. Now, the leaders who close the gap are the ones who've built practices like reflection, like feedback, attention to whatever they're rewarding. They catch the gaps when they show up. What I know to be true is that when you close the gap between your intent and your impact, your team actually starts to trust you in a very different way. They can see that you're paying attention. They can see that what you say and what you do are starting to line up. And that alignment has a huge impact on the climate you create and your team's engagement and also performance. So here's a couple more things that you can do this week. First, a reflection. What's your default pattern under pressure? Is it speed, control, withdrawal, or something else? When did it last show up, and what was the impact on the people around you? As for an action, choose just one person on your team and ask them directly, when I'm under stress, what do you notice? Is there anything I do that makes it harder for you to bring me problems? Then I want you to listen without defending. If you found this helpful, like and subscribe to my channel and subscribe to the Groundswell on Substack for more content on self-awareness, human-centered leadership practices, and the research behind what actually makes leaders effective. I'll catch you next time.